Sit down with me. That one was a painful one. Where do we start? I'm not going to talk too much about the game itself because the game followed the same formula as the previous 5 games, which was the first half was diabolical. We offered nothing. And then we come into the second half. Traps are released. We're flying for about the first 10-15 minutes. And we just seem to have this failure to just carry that momentum and make the most of it. And sometimes we get away with a draw. But by the end of the game, we're often leaving ourselves open. And as we've seen with this game and the Bournemouth game, we got exposed. And what do we put that down to? Well, I think we've got to look strongly at the mentality of this team at the moment. This whole Dr. Tottenham thing we hear, we all talk about, it's completely real. You know, when you look at just in recent games, all right, let's go back to the start of the season. We play Wolves at home, and Wolves were desperate for points. And they were about 30 seconds away from getting all 3 points at Tottenham. As it goes, we ended up getting a draw. I gave Frank the benefit of the doubt during that game because we were losing those games last season. But then fast forward further on, and you've got, Bournemouth is scrambling for points. Here comes Tottenham. Semenyo wants this, fairy tale end, final game at Bournemouth, a little subplot to that game. Well, Spurs give it to him. And then you look at West Ham. West Ham couldn't win the egg and spoon race. And they come to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and they get all 3 points. It's embarrassing, and the mentality of the team has to be questioned. The mentality of the manager has to be questioned. I want to start with the team first because this has been an ongoing thing, I think, since the Antonio Conte era. I think that was when we first, as a fan base, started to get used to losing. And that was where the rot started. And we had periods like the first few games under Ange Postecoglou where we boarded over that rot. But little by little, that rot has fed through. And we are here where we are today because of it. It was excuses as to why we're losing games. It was, blaming injuries. There was just, we just got so used to losing. And Frank has unfortunately inherited that from the previous era. We've got to talk about Thomas Frank because these results have not been good enough. If you're not winning against West Ham, who are 18th in the league, you've got to pull the manager into question. However, I think back to what I was on about with the mentality of the players, I think he's inherited a very poor situation. He's coming off the back of Tottenham winning a trophy under Ange, and there's obviously a certain amount of expectation that comes with that. You might say to me, well, Tottenham won a trophy under Ange, that's got to show a certain level of mentality, and you would be correct, but it also shows losing mentality to finish 17th in the league, to lose to Ipswich at home, to lose to Leicester at home. I wouldn't say those players who won that trophy were mentality machines. They just did what they had to do on the day, and we've dined out on that, as we should, because what a feat to win the Europa League. But Thomas Frank has come in. A big portion of the fan base wanted Ange Postecoglou to stay. So he's already at a disadvantage, and he has to win over those fans, as he has to win over every fan. And then I think he's looked at the squad, the players he's got at his disposal, and I think he's thinking he had better players at Brentford, particularly in the attack. I won't, question the defence too much. So what does he do? Well, he sets us up in a very defensive, rigid structure, packs out the midfield with defensive, strong, big players like Paulinho and Bentancur. And I think his attacking, the attacking part of our game was a bit of a second fault. And we got away with it at the start of the year. But was always one bad run away from being under massive scrutiny. Every one of his decisions, everything he was saying in press conferences was being, scanned with a magnifying glass. It wasn't the double pivot It was the fact that Jed Spence and Mickey van der Ven disrespected him when they were coming off of one of the games. And that's of Thomas Frank losing the dressing room. Or it's why certain players aren't playing, why certain players are playing. Let's take Xavi Simons, for example. Fans were very quick to question why Xavi Simons wasn't starting. Why isn't he starting? So Thomas Frank starts him. And, Xavi Simons would then have a stinker. And fans are then questioning why he's starting Xavi Simons. And then when he gets dropped again, fans are then saying, Thomas Frank is ruining his confidence. Thomas Frank isn't giving him a chance to build up some form and get some form together. He can't win. So it's safe to say Thomas Frank has really failed at uniting this fan base. So where do we go from here? Well, I think that the obvious and the most sensible decision is to go for someone who will unite this fan base. And everything points towards one man, and that man is Mauricio Pochettino. I'm not breaking any new ground. I think everyone, or the majority of fans, think that's a sensible appointment at the moment. The only issue is he's obviously with the US men national team at the moment. But why would he unite the fans when we've had, managers with far greater CVs who have failed? And I think it's because of time. If Pochettino comes through the door and the guy who got the best form out of Harry Kane, Eriksen, Dele, Vertonghen, Rose, Walker, you name it, if that guy tells you a player's not good enough, then the fan base listens. The fan base will rally behind him. If Jed Spence and Mickey van der Ven, pull off what they did to Frank, the fans turn on the players rather than the manager. Unfortunately, when you bring in a Brentford manager, he doesn't quite have the backing behind him from the fan base. He doesn't have the credentials for us to get on board with him above the players. It's different with Pochettino. And most importantly, if Pochettino says he needs time, we'll give him time. Because he's the guy who's got enough credit in the bank to deserve it. And this is a big rebuild we've got at Spurs at the moment. The players we've got are not quite to scratch. What we've replaced, Son, Kane, Son with Odegaard, it's no comparison. Kane with Richarlison. You could go all across the whole pitch, except for some areas of the defence maybe. And the players that got us top four during that era consistently, these players aren't a scratch on them. That's the route I think we've got to go. The only issue is we need someone who can get us there, get us to the end of the season, because I think Poch will come. Poch will come. We are in a very dangerous position and we could get sucked into a relegation battle if we do not fix things in the short term. I don't like switching managers all the time, but I just don't think that Thomas Frank, just what we've seen from him so far, I don't think he has the ability to turn things around at the moment. So who do we bring in? And it's a really dire pool of managers at the moment. I think, we've brought in this his number two, who has some experience in management. He has a very impressive coaching CV. Is that the route we're going to go? I don't think that's going to get the fans on board. Do you look for a club man? Someone like Robbie Keane? I don't think he has the credentials either. But at least he's someone who gets the club at the moment. And I think someone that the fans will rally behind for at least that short period of time until we can get to the summer and reassess our options. And that's where I want you guys to come in. Because this is a question that I have no answers for. Do you want Frank to stay? Do you think he can get us out of this rut? Because we're in serious danger at the moment. And if you do, who do you think is the guy to step in? It's a really poor position at the moment. And I really hope we can turn this around.